I am 83 years old, and my hands are like old oak roots, cracked, rough, and used to hard work. I spent my life building things that were meant to last, houses, bridges, and a reputation as a man who never flinched. But today, I am sitting on a cold stone bench in the Oakwood Cemetery, and I am realizing that the strongest things I built are actually the walls around my own heart. I am talking to a piece of polished gray granite. Her name was Mary. We shared a bed for 55 years. I provided for her, I protected her, and I made sure she never wanted for anything material. But in all those thousands of days, I never once looked her in the eyes and simply said the 3 words she needed to hear. I let my pride and my toughness act as a cage for my tongue. Now I whisper those words into the wind, hoping they reach her, but the only response I get is the cold silence of this headstone. We met in the summer of 1960. She was wearing a yellow sundress, and she looked like a piece of the sun had fallen to earth. I was a young veteran, taught to be stoic, taught that a man shows his love through a paycheck and a fixed roof, not through soft talk. I remember our wedding day. She looked at me with so much hope in her eyes, waiting for me to say something poetic. I just nodded and told her, "You look fine, Mary." I thought that was enough. I thought my presence was my confession. I didn't realize that a woman's soul needs to be fed with words, not just security. I spent the next 5 decades being the rock she leaned on, but I forgot that even rocks can be cold. I started a journey of silence that day, thinking I was being a man, when in reality, I was just being a coward who was afraid of his own tenderness. I worked 12-hour shifts at the mill for 30 years. I came home with grease under my fingernails and a back that felt like it was breaking. Every time I handed her my pay envelope, I felt like I was saying, "I love you." To me, that money represented every drop of sweat I shed for her. When she'd try to hug me or ask me how I felt about us, I'd just shrug and say, "I'm here, aren't I? I'm working, aren't I?" I used my exhaustion as a shield. I made her feel like asking for emotional connection was an insult to my hard work. I was providing a house, but I was failing to provide a home. I was so busy being the breadwinner that I never noticed she was starving for a single sentence of affection. I built her a life of comfort, but I decorated it with the wallpaper of my own silence. Mary used to sing in the kitchen while she made dinner. Simple songs, usually hymns or old country tunes. Sometimes she'd stop and look at me, waiting for me to join in or at least smile. I'd just keep reading the paper or staring at the television. I thought it was beneath me to be silly. I thought a man's dignity was tied to his gravity. Now the house is so quiet it rings in my ears. I'd give every cent of my pension just to hear her hum one more note. I realized too late that her singing was an invitation, a door she held open for me to walk through and be a part of her world. I kept the door shut. I chose the heavy silence of my own pride over the light melody of her heart. I lived in the same rooms with her for half a century, yet I was miles away, locked inside a tower of my own making. On our 40th anniversary, she bought me a gold-plated pen. She had it engraved with, "To my silent hero." I looked at it, grunted a thank you, and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't get her anything. I told her we didn't need trinkets to prove we were married. I saw the light go out in her eyes that night. It wasn't about the gift. It was about the recognition that she mattered enough to be celebrated. I was so afraid of looking weak that I became brittle. I equated emotion with vulnerability and vulnerability with defeat. I didn't realize that in winning the war of my own ego, I was losing the only person who truly cared if I lived or died. I kept that pen in the drawer for 20 years. Now I use it to write poems to her that she will never read, letters I place on her grave like unpaid debts. When the doctor told us it was stage 4, she didn't cry. She just reached out and took my hand. Her hand was so small and thin, I wanted to break down. I wanted to pull her close and tell her she was my entire world, but I just sat there like a statue. I told her, "We'll get through it, Mary. Don't worry about the bills." Even in the face of death, I was talking about bills. I was terrified that if I let one tear fall, the entire dam would burst and I'd lose my mind. So I stayed strong. I stayed the rock. I visited her in the hospital every day for 6 months, and every day I spoke about the weather, the car's oil change, and the news. I was a man who could fix anything with a wrench, but I was standing in front of a broken life, and I didn't have the tools to say the only thing that mattered. The last night was the quietest of all. She couldn't speak anymore, but she was conscious. She looked at me, and I knew she was waiting. She was giving me one last chance to say it. I sat there for 4 hours in that dimly lit room. I felt the words in my throat. They were heavy like stones. I love you, Mary. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. I opened my mouth to say it, but then a nurse came in to check the IV, and I closed it again. I waited for her to leave, but by the time she did, Mary's eyes were closed. She died 10 minutes later. I spent 55 years with her, and I let her leave this world wondering if she was truly loved. I held her cold hand and whispered the words then, but it was too late. I was a strong man until the very end, and that strength is what killed the person I loved the most. A month after the funeral, I was cleaning out her nightstand. I found a small blue notebook I'd never seen before. It was a diary. I opened a random page from She wrote, "Robert worked late again. He looked so tired. I wanted to tell him I love him, but he looked so distant. I wonder if he ever thinks about why he chose me. I wonder if I'm just a habit to him." Page after page, for decades, she questioned her worth in my eyes. I realized that my silence wasn't just manly, it was a weapon. It was a slow poison that I had fed her every single day. I had all the money in the savings account, but she was living in poverty of the soul because I wouldn't share a single word of warmth. I read the whole book in one night, crying like a child. I realized I didn't know the woman I had been married to for half a century because I had never let her close enough to know me. I started a garden this year. Mary always wanted one, but I told her it was a waste of time and money. Now I spend hours weeding and planting. I talk to the flowers, and then I walk to the cemetery and talk to her stone. I tell her about the tomatoes. I tell her about the blue jays, and then I say it. I say I love you 100 times a day until my throat is sore. I'm trying to pay off a debt to a ghost. I have 15 million moments of silence to make up for, and I know I'll never finish. People see me at the grave and think I'm a devoted widower. They don't know I'm a man trying to fix a bridge that's already collapsed. I am a builder who forgot to build a foundation of love, and now I am living in the ruins of my own pride. My final advice to you, especially to the men who think that providing a check is the same as providing a heart: stop being a rock. Rocks don't grow, and they don't heal. Tell her today. Tell her until she's tired of hearing it. Don't wait for a diagnosis, and don't wait for a funeral. Pride is a very cold blanket when you're 83 and sleeping alone. The invisible debt is the silence you keep to protect your ego, while the person next to you is starving for your voice. Go home, put down the newspaper, put down the phone, look into her eyes and say the words, because one day, the only thing that will hear you is a gray headstone, and trust me, it doesn't care how strong you were. Subscribe to Last Perspective, and for the love of God, don't let your silence be your legacy.